Hey, 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 everybody. So where did that come from? Hey, hey, hey. If you're my age or just a little bit younger, you know, and you're younger. Jack knows. Jack knows. So who was it, Jack?
Bad Albert, right?
Yeah.
Which
You
is
know,
actually not a very nice
What would
name.
what would what was the superhero character name? Was it or the
what
that's
you were
that's a Starbucks card. Forever can get that.
you
All right.
were you were garbling. So
All
say it
right.
again.
Who is the superhero on Fat Albert? That should be a Jack Starbucks card.
Oh, man. You got me.
I don't know it. I actually have to look it up. It's the first thing that I thought of was the next adventures of the I think it was like the Yellow Hornet or something. Like a take off the Green Hornet, but let's see.
Oh, yeah, that could be. Yeah. Yeah, back I mean, think about
Oh,
all
got
the
it. Yeah, yeah,
cartoons.
close. I should have guessed that one, but yeah, it's a Starbucks gift card. I'm giving them out on behalf of Jack.
Oh man. Well, hey, everybody, welcome. Um, this is week 238. And guess what? Week 250 is coming up in not that long. So 12 weeks, right? If I am doing the math right. And rumor has it we might just be doing a 250th week anniversary. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. So if we do a live one, stay tuned. So anybody, you know what the drill is. You can harass us in the chat, ask us questions at 250 in Disney World. Yeah, Jack's buying. Shoemaker is gonna host it. Oh, I like your thinking, Will.
Work
Um,
expense, right? Right?
hey, you know what?
Deductible. Mhm.
Unreimbursed. It could be an unreimbursed partnership expense. I'm telling you, I learned more about that again last week or a couple weeks ago, thanks to Adam. So we haven't done this for a long time, and we are going to launch a poll. I've got three or four questions in this poll, and it's about strategic planning. So we're going to go deep. He said it could be a training trip. I like that. Um, we're going to go deep onto strategic planning, but and it looks like we just lost. It looks like we just lost Jack. I was just going to throw the mic
No,
over to him.
we got this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's had electrical problems in his office. Oh, there you are. Jack's back. So we will I'll launch this poll in a little bit, but I want to give both you guys an opportunity to hit current events. Cliff Clavin, Jack, I'll toss it over to you first and then back over to Adam, and then we can go deeper into strategic planning.
Yeah, the only thing really that I have for today is the same as it was, at least for now, which is that with the Corporate Transparency Act, the beneficial owner information reporting is still on hold. It is likely going to have to go up to the Supreme Court to be dealt with if they decide to deal with it. And so the U.S. government has asked for the Supreme Court to weigh in on the stay, meaning the pause of the reporting requirement and of the enforcement requirement. But I have not heard whether or not the Supreme Court has added that to its docket as of yet. So our guidance, as it was before, which is to put together the information that's required and just have it ready to go just in case. Some people are filing because they, again, are like, oh, well, the government already has all those pieces of information in various places, whether it's the IRS that has your ownership information or the NCDMV or US DOT that has your driver's license information. So it really, no big deal. Others are on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is that why give the government any more information or organize it any better than they already have it? So really it's up to all of us as business owners as to what we want to do. We have filed them over the course of the year for the ones that were formed. And then we do have some information from other clients who have said, well, just in case I'm on a 2-week vacation from somewhere, please have this ready to file. So that's kind of the gambit of people's thinking on that.
All right, that's good. That's a good update. Hopefully, if you have friends, relatives, etc., in Los Angeles, I checked in on a CEO that I've supported for a long time in Manhattan Beach, and she lives right on the beach. And I sent her a note at 7:11 a.m. yesterday, and so it's 4:11 her time, and she answered. She works on like 3 hours of sleep. She's one of the most incredible human beings I know. I don't know how she does it, but she does it, and she's like, "No, we're okay." But because Manhattan Beach is further south, Palisades and all that's further north, if I remember right. I heard, I don't know if you guys heard this or not, but the Getty Museum, like if you've ever been to LA, that Getty Art Museum, John Paul Getty, the oil tycoon who had a grandson that was kidnapped. I mean, John Paul Getty was a miserable human being. I'm just going to say it. He was a very miserable human being, but his art collection is unbelievable. And I got to see it. And I heard that the Getty may have been impacted. I don't know if anybody knows anything about that. That would be tragic because the museum's unbelievable. But anyway, some crazy stuff going on out there. Adam, any updates from you? Rants that you want to talk about?
No, I think probably the only thing to hit on is that I'm still on my news diet, so it makes it a little tough. I'm counting on Jack to keep me current these days. But what I have heard is that both the Senate and the House have telegraphed from the agenda that it's following what our thinking is, which is immigration first, tax legislation second, with tax legislation. I actually think that John Thune even said the summer. So if I'm not mistaken, so I just think folks don't hold your breath for anything anytime really soon. But at the same time, all is not lost in that even if something ultimately passes in the first quarter of next year, usually things that pass at least up until mid-year of the next year, so in this case it'd be mid-year 2026, usually you're done retroactively to the preceding tax year. So I wouldn't worry too much about something getting through. Again, our speculation is probably going to keep things for the most part as is. If I was to speculate on what are two items that they probably will do something about. One is I'd suspect that they'll probably do something about the research and development credit to make it to where that's actually a more appealing credit for people to take that are profitable. Because right now, it ultimately can save a company money, but you really have to be patient. In that savings. So it really makes people rethink, do I really have R&D or not? So it's just not, it's not a great benefit right now. Secondly, I think the other thing that I could see getting through is something around the state and local tax deduction. Because right now there's not, right now you can only deduct up to 10, part of the, I mean, this isn't being political, I don't think. The calculus of the removal of the state and local tax deduction is we have to pay for this 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act somehow. So a win would be, let's take away a deduction that high tax states that are not Republican states would normally get as a way of pay, like they said that. So but at the same time, it's like kind of shooting yourself in the foot because the difference between the North Carolina tax rate and the New Jersey tax rate or the California tax rate is like 4 or 5%. So like we got rid of a deduction for ourselves too. Like I'm gonna drink the poison, Gary, and I'm gonna watch you die. So I think people are like, hey, we need to bring that back. Now the nice thing that the states have done, if you are a business owner, is I think pretty much every state has adopted what's called the pass-through entity tax, which is a regime that allows you to pay taxes at the company level that are for the benefit of the business owner and get a deduction. So even though it's kind of a backdoor way of getting the state and local tax deduction back, it's not actually that. So my point in saying that is why I think it would be logical for them to do something about the state and local tax deduction at the federal level, is because that's meaning that a business owner is getting a benefit that a wage earner is not. And generally they try to keep at least, so in other words, like there's not really an incentive. We're not incentivizing anything like on that level, right? So I feel like other than the states were trying to incentivize, hey, would you pay your bills, please, by allowing us to get it, so they're getting revenue quicker. That's what the states liked about it, and better compliance. But at the federal level, what that means is like the guy working at Bank of America isn't getting a deduction, whereas a person making the equivalent amount that is an owner of an S corp is. So they I could see him doing something like I could see him doing something on that front, which would then allow them to say, hell yeah, Jack, you got a tax cut. Something kind of, something that isn't, in other words, that's kind of like one of those mom and apple pie, you know, like that's what you'd be arguing against if you're arguing against the state and local tax deduction, like something that's been in place forever that was taken away, that in hindsight people are kind of pissed about because it affects everybody equally, so I could see him doing something about that, but that's about it. I mean, I don't see a lot of, I just don't, in the rhetoric that I'm seeing so far in the Republican Party, I just feel like, deficit hawks are bumping up against the everybody gets a unicorn people. So I just don't see. I mean, I just don't see how anything could happen but the status quo. In other words, like other than like a couple changes on the margins. So yeah, again, you can go down your X black holes if you want to. I wouldn't recommend wasting any time on it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All it's going to do is increase your blood pressure and depress you. So.
Yeah. No, this guy, like, he's totally authoritative, Gary. He said that there's going to be a flat tax. They're going to abolish the IRS. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. So two follow-up comments to that. First, I appreciate the indirect reference to the Princess Bride with the whole poison thing.
Yeah.
You had going on. And secondly, to support your comment about the immigration, we have hired 2 immigration attorneys in our Charleston office in anticipation of there being an uptick in immigration work, not the deportations and things like that, but more so the rules regarding business owners, foreign business owners coming into, and I say this in a nice way, and it's not meant to be derogatory or flippant, but buying their way into the country by bringing a bunch of money into and getting a visa associated with that. So that in anticipation of those rules being tightened up more so, and only allowing people into the country via that route that are legit investors into the U.S. economy. So we've bolstered up that practice group for those reasons.
That was kind of strategic. Which leads us to our conversation about strategic planning. All right, so I'm going to launch this poll, and I've peeked into our attendee list. And so here's the first question. Did you attend the best year ever event this week? It's a single choice. Do you guys see this poll? Did you guys get it? Yep. So I know for a fact there are at least 2 people in this audience that did. So, if, okay, Jamie, you raised your hand. That's good. Vote on the poll. So there we go. There we go. That's awesome. So if you do, and if you did, or if you've ever been to the best year ever, how powerful this thing is. Sorry, it's over. It was 3 hours yesterday, but man, I love that thing. And you know, we had 125 or 126 people there online as well as in person. I think we had 32 in person, and then everybody else was online because we had limited seating. But that leads me to the next thing. So, have you or your team done your strategic planning for 2025 yet? No shame. We aren't going to call you out. We aren't going to shame you if you haven't. I just wanted to get a read of the room. So 11 of the 22 of you on here, and 22 includes the three of us. So we're up to 12 that have voted. And then do you have an outside growth coach that helps you with strategic planning and team performance like EOS, organizational excellence, scaling up, etc.? So about a third of the room, at least of the 12, and that say yes. And then are you a member of a professional peer-to-peer group like Vistage, C12, etc.? I know that Papa Joe and his son Sean have and are and Vistage, and I know Adam's part of Vistage. So that's really good. That really helps me understand kind of where the room is. And so, okay, hold on. I'm reading in the chat here. So, Donnie, if you have time at the end, when an employee is asked to sign a typical large volume employee handbook, the second they walk in, let's see, hold on. Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry. Thanks, Joe, for clarifying. You're not C12, but Sean is. All right, here we go. So Donnie says, second they walk in the door and has a non-compete and it has non-compete like statements in it, but they never signed a separate non-compete and were never given compensation. Is that enforceable? Ooh, that's a legal question. Hey,
And
don't be
and the
giving us
answer
any
is,
advice.
and the
It
answer is,
depends. Hey, I've been on these things long enough. I'm catching on to all this legalese. It depends.
right. And here's a funny little story, which I will prove when it's warmer. So Michelle, my colleague, as a Christmas present, gave me a shirt that says "It depends." So one day I will wear it on this show.
Good.
So the answer is it depends, but for various reasons. So enforceability of a non-compete generally has to do with the geography and the time, but it also depends upon when you present that information and requirement to the prospect employee, or even a current employee that's signing up a different agreement and may have a different non-compete. So let's say that your form has been updated in the past 2 years, but this person's non-compete is one from 5 years ago that was different than what it is now. So that's considered a different non-compete, which requires additional consideration. And we could go into a lot of different things about enforceable, non-enforceable, what it takes. But to answer your question, generally speaking, the person who is going to sign a restrictive covenant needs to be aware of it and usually needs to see it beforehand. There's gray area where you tell someone, hey, you're going to be restricted, and here are the general restrictions: 2 years within the state of North Carolina for any competing business. Gray area. When you stick it in an employment manual that you give to them on their first day, that can be problematic because they haven't had an opportunity to look at it. You have them, is it coercion? Because sign it or else. It's kind of like what franchise registration states don't like, which is presenting a document that says at the time of closing or signing your franchise agreement, I have not been told anything else. I'm not relying upon any other information except what is in the disclosure document, in the franchise agreement, and anything else that's been given to me in writing. And I waive this is the key part, I waive any rights that I have to protest that I was given information that is not in these pieces of paper. So similar concept, which is you don't have time to review what is in an employee manual if you're given it on the first day of your employment, even if you tell them. And again, you get into the gray area. Even if you have told them you're going to be signing up for this, it's actually even worse than if you give them their employment contract on the day of the first day and you've told them that there's going to be a restrictive covenant. If you put it in an employee manual buried amongst everything else and all the excitement of the first day and onboarding and meeting people and doing all this, I think you'd have a hard time enforcing a restrictive covenant under those circumstances. So I think it would be my answer is very challenging to enforce a non-compete in an employee manual that is presented on day one of employment.
Donnie,
You didn't read the
we weren't gonna make you wait until last for that one.
But the
So,
fine print, Jack, I mean, they're also supposed to submit to a DNA test. I mean, just kidding.
Yes, a cheek swab and
Yeah,
everything
all the
else.
stuff, all the stuff.
Yeah.
so I guess we're gonna have to pass the bill in order to see what's in it, Nancy. I guess that doesn't apply here. It should have applied to them, but it didn't. Enough about that. So here is the question. As we go into strategic planning, so about a third of the room, if I remember right, said, yeah, let's go back in here. I'm looking at it, and actually about half of the room. Oh, now it's more than that. 62% of those who answered of the 13 have done strategic planning for 2025. 38% had not. And the majority, 69%, do not have an outside coach, and 80% are not members of peer-to-peer groups. This is not a solicitation. It is, all I'm just going to say is my experience. I had my first outside coach on the first turnaround I was brought in. My partner had already hired him. He was $10,000 a day. And this is 1991, 23 grand in today's money per day, plus expenses. Well, I didn't have to pay that first bill, but once I signed on and became a partner, I split that bill 50-50, and it was, ooh boy, was that a pucker fest, every time. But every time we did it, I saw the value of that. And here's my point with this. Self-implementation, I want to ask Adam about this because they have been using, and we have been using EOS, but even way before I joined about 6 years ago. I want to find out what your opinion was and what your experience was of self-implementing versus having an outside coach. Adam.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple, like the problem with self-implementing when you're trying to implement your own strategy is that as the CEO, it usually means you're going to be the facilitator, so it's hard not to influence the outcome then. So you're not really, and I mean, you're probably going to influence the outcome anyway. It's just that if you're up there directing traffic, you're probably also not getting the best conversations out of your team. Also, if things start to get heated or off topic, sometimes, Gary can attest to, sometimes I'm actually the cause of that, so it's nice to have, a facilitator
True.
who can say, hey, dude, you need to shut up. That's just general statement from a participation standpoint. I think the other thing too is that it, I don't know, Gary, did you go to facilitation class, when you went to Kansas State?
No, that was
Yeah,
not
no,
part of
yeah. Did you get it? Did you
Ag
get it at
U.
Yeah, did you get it at Carolina, Jack?
No, not that I remember.
Yeah, so no, you don't know how to freaking do this anyway, so why would you all of a sudden it's like I woke up this morning, stayed at a Holiday Inn, and now I'm a freaking expert at
Yeah.
facilitating a group. But that's pretty high ego when you think about it. So it's really selling yourself short. And, the last thing I'd say too is that it there's little things that you just don't know, as a person, uh if you haven't done this a lot before. So for example, you know, when brainstorming, if you just say, hey, we're brainstorming, and you start with a white paper, that doesn't work as well as, hey, we're brainstorming, start with 5 minutes of writing by yourself, and then we're going to round robin and share the results. Because if you do
Yeah.
the former, what ends up happening is like, my idea was close enough, or I'm not giving my idea. People are going to think I'm stupid, So,
Yeah.
or all of a sudden you start to see groupthink that happens versus, the independent writing. You have everybody's writing like that. You're writing. Even the most introverted person that may have no ideas at all is writing something. That may be of value. So you just don't know stuff like that. In terms of tips and tricks, unless you're a trained facilitator. So, it's sort of, it is sort of like, it's funny, when I think about, other areas of my life where I've asked for and, paid for assistance. It's like, I won't hire a personal trainer, you know, only because I'm too freaking stubborn. Which is just stupid. Like, what kind of results I could get if I got a personal trainer, like it'd be ridiculous, but I just won't. Like, I can't, for some reason I just can't get over the mental block of like, no, I can research yet again the same answer, Gary.
Yeah, you
Versus just
can't
like,
outwork a bad diet.
yeah, like same A, it's 80% diet. Can I work? Will I see a nutritionist? No. I use Chat GPT, but I won't go see it. Like, it's the same concept.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. A lot of times pain will push us into behavior. That's why we hired Stuart Sanders in 1991, because my partner was basically I mean, he was bankrupt and he didn't have the money to go bankrupt, So it was desperate. It was desperate how he came up with the 10 plus the first class airfare plus a nice hotel in Wichita, Kansas from Richmond, Virginia. I still don't know. Maybe he was borrowing from his wife's, pension or something. I don't know. But nonetheless, we did it. And what I've found is, if you pay, first of all, you better do your research and have somebody that knows what they're doing. And Stuart Sanders was a guru in our space. And so we spent a lot of money for this guy because he was good. But so have somebody good. But then if you're paying, you're usually going to pay attention. But I have this funny example. So there was a guy that I was coaching, and they were at the time about 20 million in top line. And within a couple years after we started coaching, and it's not just because of me but they were at like 52. It was like amazing. But they were having 8-hour meetings 1 day a week with his top 13 most expensive people in the entire company. 8 hours. And it was just a bloodbath. I mean, it was the beatings will continue until morale improves. It was just awful. And so our job was to try to get down to 1.5 hour meetings and not the rabbit trails. But what was happening when this guy was self-implementing, it was like, hurry up, jump in the car, let's go. Where are we going? I don't know. We'll figure it out. That's what strategic planning or lack thereof is like in a lot of places. Hop in the car, mash the gas, let's go. Where are we going? I don't know. We'll know when we get there. And I'm just curious, anybody listening to this, I'm curious when you're looking at setting your budgets, some people don't even do it. And even larger companies, it's kind of mind blowing. And yeah, when we set a budget, how close do you hit? It's a refinement and it's a hard thing. We've gotten pretty good at it lately in the last few years. because it's been a bottom up and top down kind of meeting. But I'm just curious, hit me in the chat or in the Q&A, hit me in the chat if this is how it is. Well, okay, so last year we had X in our sales. What do we think it's going to be like this year? 10%. Add 10%. I'm just curious, how many of you guys deal with that, or even with your sales team? What do you guys think? Yeah, 10% more. I think I can sign up for that. I'm just curious. That doesn't seem real strategic, and yet I've done the same thing. So there's no shame here. It's just a conversation. I'm curious. So hit us up in the chat. Anybody?
And while
No,
that's happening, I will validate that on behalf of, or share some of my clients that basically will take last year's budget and not even have last year's actual numbers at this point, 10 days into January, and put together a budget based upon adding, let's add 10%. That probably sounds right. Hey, maybe 15 because the White House has changed and we believe there's going to be a business impact for that. So yeah, making just and year after year doing that, and then and then what happens is you don't include the anomalies. So let's say there was a big windfall with a customer, or there was a big issue that was costly that year. Maybe there were some warranty issues or something that came up, and if you don't extract or account for those pluses and minuses, then you're going to be way off. And I see that happening with when you have professional service companies that the individuals, let's say a law firm generates, or a CPA firm generates revenue based upon certain performance. And let's say that I had a client that got involved in, 6-figure attorney fee litigation last year, which is actually true. Our management has to look at that and say, okay, is that an anomaly? Is that something that's going to occur this year? And, the default answer is, well, I'm not a litigator, so probably not, but I know that I will have transactions that will continue and increase based on my relationships with partners, or I'm sorry, with clients. And so, I had some splaining to do to make sure that my compensation was appropriately pegged for 2025, at least anticipating that. Obviously, there would be adjustments, pluses or minuses at the end of the year. So those are things that I think get missed, and making assumptions as you've stated. So curious as to how the poll turned out, or how the chat turned out.
Well, one brave soul has already come in and said that would be me. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the reality is we've all been there. And good intentions kind of like they're like sprints. Yeah, I'll go do good intention, I'll do a sprint, but like each year is a marathon, and intentions won't take you 26.2 miles or beyond if you're doing ultras or anything like that. It just won't get you there. And I think one of the biggest things, regardless of what your framework is and what you use, whether EOS or organizational excellence or scaling up, etc., is yes, you have to start with long term, but then you got to break it down into what's happening this week. I mean, down into the quarter, and then what's happening this week. Because what happens a lot of times is we start off great in January. Okay, boy, this is going to be great. And then if we are not monitoring, or if we've set unrealistic goals and we haven't really thought about what is that impact on a daily and weekly basis to hit the next quarter, we've already demoralized ourselves, because there's no way we're going to hit it. And then it's like, whatever, strategy, schmategy. So my gut is, I mean, what I've seen is it's important that we look out beyond a year. Like we like 10-year and 3-year targets, which are like, how in the world are we ever going to hit that 10-year? Who knows? But it's aspirational. 3 years, becomes a lot more real because that's only 12 quarters. But then a year and then back it into quarters, like how are we going to do this? I think that's really important. So I'd be curious as to hearing anybody else weigh in on this thing um, based
Yeah.
on your experience.
Yeah. I think, this hits a little bit to, what Jamie just put in the chat, Gary. I think, I've refined my thinking on this subject over time. And it can sound really negative. Um, I think the other thing, we're talking about strategic planning, and I think what I've seen happen a lot of times is, people talk about, kind of, really cool aspirational stuff, which is great. It's like it makes you feel better, but at the same time, they then ignore in those same meetings the question of what's about to kill me.
Mm.
Like in other words, like they think about like, even if they go through a SWOT analysis, like they don't approach it from like, what's about to kill me, because like death is not imminent, in a lot of respects. Right. So so for example, operating cash is tight, speaking from experience, that puts you into fight or flight mode. And until you solve that, it's really hard to like focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
if you have, if your labor efficiency is terrible, meaning like, hey, you've got, too many belly buttons relative to the revenue that I've got, even if I'm profitable, but I'm still at the low end of the profit spectrum, that's gonna kill you, if you don't do something about it. So I think I feel like, something that kind of gets overlooked that I guess I just would encourage, mostly it's funny because like when we give this advice, it always comes from the position of, well, we're doing it. So all of a sudden it's like the most, if we're doing it, everybody needs to do it right now. In fact, I just finished a white paper on it. So it really, I feel like, hey, let's focus on the crap that's going to kill us, and make sure that, which another way of phrasing that's a little bit nicer would be, if we were to write down everything that was a fire drill last year, you know, do we have something in place to address the fire drill, such that we're not, we can put the fire drills in the rearview mirror and actually have a chance to focus on the positive, because again, what ends up happening is like, it's no different than the diet and the exercise, rah, rah, I'm starting out the year good, um, everything's going great, maybe even hit the gym or at least sign up for it. And then I eat the big plate of nachos because I'm hungry and I didn't prepare adequately. And all the next thing, like, year ruined January 9th. None of this works. So I think as I thought about this webinar, I think the one thing that I just asked people to focus on would really be to take 2025 to be the opportunity to say, no more fire drills. Like we're out of the fire drill business. Like what are the fire drills and how do what solutions do we need to put in place to not have many more? And, everybody's gut feeling. In other words, like, I know this would never happen at Shoemaker Jack. But let's say that, hypothetically, some other M&A attorney, were to say something like, because this would never happen at a CPA firm, by the way, well, why do we have a fire drill? We don't have enough people, and the data does not support that conclusion. It's sort of like, how do you solve the education crisis? Throw more money at it. Maybe, maybe not, but where's the empirical data to prove it? So I think that there's just, or we just need more sales. If we just had more sales, that would fix everything. I don't know. I mean, maybe, is that Or is there an underlying fire drill that is redirecting your attention that, if solved, would allow you to focus on the sales? You know, so I just, 2025 is a year of hey, no more fire drills. At least for us.
Not self-induced, at least.
Yeah, no, yeah. Don't be Bill Buckner.
We've had our own arsonists. And
Yeah.
what? So, oh, speaking of arson, timely. I'm going to go back into the chat because here are a few things that have come through. So Bruce says, among some higher risk industries, my experience was that the companies that were more opportunistic to changing factors did very little did very detailed budgeting for the upcoming quarter and the quarter to follow, but then only trend lines for Q3 and Q4. The annual process satisfied external source needs like auditors and investors, but allowed management to be more adaptive to change. That's a great point. That is a really good point, because I remember we did this huge strategic plan when I was in this big private equity firm. And and our vice chairman said, after we did, like, our COO was leading the charge on this, and our vice chairman said, well, one thing's for sure, that whatever's in this plan, this won't be our outcome. Like, it was kind of defeatist, but I understand because stuff happens. But it's kind of like, well, hey, it never works, so I'm just going to pass the nachos. Adam has seen, hey, you know what? I'm going to do everything within my power to address stuff. Life comes at us that we don't expect. I didn't expect 4 eye surgeries this last year. I mean, no way. You got to adapt and overcome. But you've got to have a plan and the ability to adapt. And I think having your team involved versus a top down, I would like you to talk about that a little bit, Adam, because just from a budgeting standpoint, so this isn't even necessarily strategic planning, but like budgeting, talk about the way it used to be and the way that we've been doing it, and we're still learning, but the differences in final outcomes versus plan.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I did want to get to Joe's comment before I hit it on the sales forecasting.
Yeah, go for it.
Because we'll end up touching on a little bit of this in terms of the what we've done that so far has worked. I mean, the last couple years we have landed within 1%, which is unbelievable, of our beginning of the year forecast. So I think from that perspective, sales forecasting is an exact science in and of itself. In our business, everything evolves from those actual numbers, service revenue, parts, admin needs, etc. So it becomes the best guess on market trends. I think, yeah, somewhat, and at the same time, where the science does come into place is that, you know your average deal size. You kind of know what your target is. You know what your conversion rate is. The attribute. You know who your ideal customer is. You know your attributes of a good conversion, and you also know what your conversion time is. So my point in saying all that is that, if I know, that I'm only issuing proposals to my ideal customer, that's like a good starting point, versus like I'm just issuing proposals that, while my salesperson may be telling me hey, it's looking good, Gary, it's looking good. The Johnson file's looking. That's not like I'm not. Bank of America just humor me for a free lunch. They're not going to buy from me. There's an incumbent. I've got no chance of displacing that. Don't even put it on the list. So, at the same time, it's like, hey, it's 100%. Well, you haven't addressed this point, this point, this point, this point. So at best, it's 25%. So you can start to get a lot more. I guess our experience has been that there are some points that you can measure in the sales process that people tend to gloss over or ignore that can make it more precise. But Gary, a specific question on the revenue planning, it's painful, but it has produced a good result. So what we start off with is a top down um, guess, and that is driven by a couple people, which includes Gary. Just hey, based on last year, what we know we got coming back, what we think we can do based on sales from last year. What do we think? What do we think is a likely result? And that produces a number. And then what ends up happening is a bottoms up validation on pretty close to an account by account basis of what we expect from each account, inclusive of any scope changes or pricing changes. And if there's a gap, we got to figure out, well, how do we address the gap? It's like, is that a gap that we believe that is okay, or is that a gap that we have to either go back on the bottoms up perspective and say, hey, can you push a little bit harder because your client isn't meeting a pricing or profitability target, or do we got to lower the top line forecast? Like a lot of people, this is where I think we part company with the management gurus out there that talk about setting a BHAG, a big hairy audacious goal. And I don't believe in that for 1 year goals.
No.
I think that's okay for probably 3 year goals. I think 1 year thing should be based in reality. Like, you can set some stretch goals, but you shouldn't plan around that. You should plan around reality for a year. So then the next thing that we do is once that's locked in, the cost structure has to match it. Like, we start with a profitability target at the bottom, and then everything else is filling in the details in the middle. And it's like this back and forth, round and round, painful conversation, that is just brutal and painful for people at times. But once it's locked in, and that's our whole leadership team. Once it's locked in, that's it. We're locked in and we're ready to roll. And so far, we've done a really good job of sticking to that in terms of landing the plane. So before, what would happen, and this is going back years, is whoever was in charge of the money would develop the budget, and everybody else would say, that's cute, and then just go about their day.
Yeah.
And then
what were the results like?
Yeah, so we could check the box, yep, we have budget, but nobody was bought into it. That was like the thing that the money person created. Like that, that's not our deal. There was no compensation tied, like there was nothing. So we never hit it. Usually the expenses would usually be, plus or minus 10%, but the revenue would be off, 15%. But the problem is the revenue or the expenses were based on the 15% number that nobody bought into. So we ended up with suboptimal, profitability, which is extremely, extremely common in my experience on our client base. That, like, the CEO sets a revenue target, nobody freaking buys into it, and then they build an expense budget around it because, Gary, of course we're going to hit that. How can we not?
Failure is not an option. I've heard that more than once from the CEO.
Yeah, it's just insanity. Like, just stop doing that. That's stupid. So anyway, soapbox done.
So I want to
because that would never happen at Shoemaker, right, Jack?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's funny because you don't learn this stuff in college, and I only had 2 years of it. So, but the people that I know that have advanced degrees, they validate the same thing. They don't. What I've seen works is a top-down vision, but a bottom-up buy-in and part of the sausage making, which is messy and it's difficult. But then you're in. And and I'll use another example. So Billy Austin, who was on our podcast a couple episodes ago, he bought an engineering company. And, a lot of these engineers are not necessarily big salespeople. And he bought it right before the Great Recession. Oh, that's great. And all of a sudden, he's got a bunch of engineers sitting around doing nothing. And they got no work. And, it's like, hey, I bought this car and the tranny just fell out. So he's like, well, I'm getting in my car and I'm going to start calling on people. He didn't know what he was doing, but he's like, I'm just going to do it. And in some ways, when you have an entire team that's vested, because we have individual sales targets for our, uh, for some of us, like we're not a traditional CPA firm where, hey, if you're a partner, you got to hit certain goals. That's not how we do it. But we all have targets that we've signed up for and that we got to hit. Well, what happens if, we're halfway through the year and somebody's not hitting it? The rest of us have to adjust because sometimes maybe that person just got taken out or they're on assignment that has just completely engulfed them. The rest of the team has to, bow up and do it. But if you're waiting until December, too late, Sally Charlie, it's not going to work. Anyway, Joe Farrell, hey, he says, do you believe setting those realistic goals becomes self-fulfilling? So I'm going to weigh in on it. Here's the way that the BHAG should use. A BHAG should be 10 years out. How in the world? It should be aspirational. It should grab your belly button and pull the team. Not just you, the CEO, but it should pull the entire team. That's why it's important to have the entire team part of it. Well, how in the world are we going to do it? I don't know. Then you got to bring it back into a 3-year, and it shouldn't necessarily be financially driven on the BHAG. 3-year goal should have some of those things. But let's say that, oh, hey, we want to be triple where we're at. Well, so that's, those are daunting goals on an annual basis. Then start looking at it like, what in the world do we have to hit this year in order to hit that 3HAG or the 3-year highly achievable goal? It should be more realistic than the BHAG, but the 1 year better be realistic. And even if it's a stretch goal, that team needs to be bought in. So yeah, I guess it could be self-fulfilling. And especially if you're just like, hey, phoning it in. But if we don't, here's what I do know. If we don't write it down and if we don't have the team bought in, whatever you hope will happen won't.
So
Just won't
Joe,
happen.
yeah, and my thoughts on that are, athletes, when, they need to see that ball going through the hoop, those penalty kickers need to see the ball in the back of the net. And if they don't visualize that, then it becomes more difficult. It's not that they won't achieve getting a basket or getting a goal, but they need to visualize that happening and lead to their own success. I mean, we are wired as human beings to, self-fulfill certain things. And so at least I believe that. And so that's what got me up into a class yesterday at 5 a.m. was that I'm not going to be able to self-fulfill getting back into certain dress pants unless I lose some weight, which is not going to happen overnight unless I make some effort. So those kind of things. I want to go back to Bruce's comment about, looking at Q1, Q2, set some numbers, and then reevaluate Q3, Q4, which I think is very important. And I want to tie that into what Adam was talking about with respect to fire drills. If you set up an annual budget and anticipated revenues, costs, et cetera, and you are not on a consistent basis, and I'm not saying every day, but at least, mid-year or, sooner, maybe on a quarterly basis, reevaluating your assumptions that got you into that budget. It may be the fact that, something has changed revenue wise. It may be, we're talking about aspirational goals. Maybe that aspirational goal should change because you brought on a client who now has asked you to do something specific, but there are opportunities with divisions of that new customer, that new client. And so you're always adjusting. but not to a point of paranoia. So I also have clients, and I'm sure you guys do, that, are looking at it all the time and are stressing themselves out at everything that occurs. They're being very reactive rather than letting the dust settle and then reevaluating it. It's kind of like for the same reason that I do not have a stock ticker on my computer screen, and I will not work in your office or on your computer if you do. It's because I do not want to know. It's not that I'm putting my head in the sand. It's just that,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
things are going to go like this, and you need to be anticipate for that. So, those adjustments, I think, or those reviewing that, will help reduce the fire drills that Adam was talking about somewhat, and I think are required so that you are not on a trajectory that is incorrect based upon assumptions of revenue or costs or both.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. The distractions can be real, and like there's another friend of mine that launched his company right before the Great Recession, and like Adam, he's like, I have to go on a TV and news fast because like it's just bringing me down and it's completely taking me away from my mission. I've got everything on the line. So he and his wife went all in on this company. They liquidated everything right before disaster hit. Well, hey, nobody was planning on that. What did they do? They just focused. They focused, and I like keeping it as simple as possible. If you as the CEO and you as the leader have vision and focus and clarity on where you're going, your team needs that same clarity on where the company's going and what their respective roles are and what they need to do, and then they need to cascade it down. So however you make that work, for us, we've had an outside coach, and that works for us. It's not the coach; they just help holding us accountable, and we're self coaching in between those coaching sessions too. I mean, we've upped the game on our leadership team. We have morning and evening check-ins now with an accountability partner that's on the leadership team, and we have 10 people on the leadership team. That's more, but we're like, if we're going to have an even better year this year and we want our people to be more accountable, that's what we're going to have to do. And we as the leaders have to set the tone. And so that's what I would encourage everybody that's on this call today. Look in the mirror and say, am I doing what I need to do as the leader versus why don't these people do anything? Like start at the top.
And there's a whole subset of discussion about not just are you doing what you need to be doing as the leader, but are your people doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the toxicity that can occur just from one person and how it permeates through. And so, there's all kinds of analogies, right person on the bus kind of things, but we can talk about that another time since it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah. So, Joe, I'm looking forward to your book, Death by Meeting. That's how I felt my life was at Bank of America. That's for doggone sure. I mean, sorry, Bank of America, but that's how it was. I worked at night, so I got my work done. But yeah, meetings are important, but man, the shorter the better, and the more focused the better. Those 8-hour meetings, like this guy that I was talking about, those were death. Those were death by meeting. Hey, everybody! So thank you for joining us. It is the high noon hour. We'll put this up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel, and Shoemaker will do the same on theirs later on this afternoon. Hopefully, we'll see you next week, week 239. Stay tuned for that one. See
Thanks,
y'all.
guys.
All right, see you guys.
Stay
Bye-bye.
warm.
All right,
You
bye.
too.